Welcome, everyone. My name is Licha Canton, and I'm the founding editor-in-chief of Accenti magazine. Welcome to Accenti's Countering Isolation with Creativity, a project made possible through the financial support of Employment and Social Development Canada as part of the New Horizons Seniors Program. This is the 6th workshop in a series of 10. Welcome to Eufemia Fantetti's Writing About Family and Yourself. Eufemia Fantetti is an instructor, a writer, and editor. She co-edited the award-winning anthology Tongues on Longing and Belonging Through Language, which was published in 2021 with Ayelet, Tsabari, and Leonarda Carranza. And Eufemia has authored two books. Eufemia, welcome. We're really excited to learn from you, and the microphone is yours.
Thank you, Licha. Okay, and thank you everyone for joining on this lovely afternoon in September. I hope it's lovely where you are. It is here. I want to just, Licha, I never get to see you enough, so thank you for asking me to do this. And Maria Pia, you're a saint for doing the tech. I so appreciate it. Thank you. I'm going to start with a land acknowledgement. So I'd like to ask you to please take a moment to consider where you're joining us from, the land and the territory you're joining us from. I'd like to acknowledge that this land where I live is the traditional territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Haudenosaunee, and most recently the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation. This territory was the subject of the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Belt Covenant, an agreement between the Haudenosaunee Confederacy and the Anishinaabe and allied nations to peaceably share and care for the resources around the Great Lakes. As a settler, I acknowledge the ongoing harm caused by settler colonialism and the residential school system to the complete well-being of the people Indigenous to this land. Tikaranto is home to many Indigenous people from across Turtle Island. I'm grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land and strive to do so in a way that honors the spirit of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant and my obligations under subsequent treaties. All right, so welcome. I'm glad that you've joined me for a subject that's very dear to my heart, writing about family and myself. It's something that I did all the time on my own, and then suddenly my creative writing went in that direction. So I mean that I wrote in journals and I kept a record of the things that I was experiencing with my family. And I started off as a playwright and then as a fiction writer. And then I found that the floodgates really opened up when I stopped trying to fictionalize the experiences that I'd lived through with my family. And I just started writing them as this is what happened. This is what happened. So what's going to happen today is I'm going to give you a bunch of prompts that I hope will generate a lot of material for you to return to after this workshop and write. We'll talk about the inspiration and concerns about writing about our families. So why we're inspired to do it, why it stresses us out. We're going to have 2 examples from 2 writers I love. And we're going to do a lot of the writing, and then we're going to wrap up with some self-care prompts, because sometimes when we write about ourselves or our families, it tends to stir up feelings, whether that's joy or whether that's grief or loss. We want to make sure that we're taking care of the self that shows up to write about those stories that we want to record. So I won't be asking anybody to share any writing. I'm just going to be giving you prompt. A lot of it will be asking you to make a list so that then you can return back to that list and use it as a resource to write whatever it is that you choose to write. So a little bit more about me. My family comes from this small area in Italy called Molise. The village that my family comes from is Bonefro. That picture of my maternal grandmother covering her face, I think she might have been afraid of the technology of the camera, but the fountain there in the background actually has my last name on it, Fantetti. And I remember we were there when I was 11, and I said to my father, seeing this, this fountain chiseled with, the date was something like 1759, and it had my last name, which, in Canada, I'd never seen it anywhere. So I said, are we famous here? And he said, no, it's not us. It's a different family. So my parents are they're second cousins, and they were married through an arranged marriage, and they're totally ill-suited for each other. And then they had this daughter, they had an only child who wanted to become a writer. And I just think this is the perfect formula for someone who writes a memoir, just based on the background that I've given you there, the context of where we're from and all the different things that happened. You know, for generations, we lived in that part of the world. And then I'm the first generation born here on this soil. So I think we want to consider why we write about ourselves and our family. There's this myth, or there's this negative story out there that it's navel gazing to write about ourselves, like we're self-absorbed, but I actually found that's not true. Certainly you encounter feelings, or I've encountered feelings of like, oh, who cares? Why bother? Like, why are you so, but every time I sit down to write, I end up writing about the people closest to me and myself. And it does feel a little bit uncomfortable, in a sense of feeling like maybe I'm too self-absorbed, but I'm actually writing to understand what we went through and to understand myself. I'm trying to make order from the chaos that my family experienced. So there's these three reasons that I came up with were to know myself, to understand. I can't help it. It really is like I have ideas for stories, I sit down to write, and the next essay comes from me, or the next nonfiction piece. And then really this is about connection, of linking our personal experience to the universal experience that everyone's lived through. So we are all connected. And I think that last point is incredibly important, because no one came into this life with a guidebook. So when we read true stories written by other people, we're reading to see what they experienced and how they survived the things, the obstacles and everything that life threw at them. We want to sort of see how you get through these pressurized situations with an amount of grace, or an amount of luck, or whatever it is that helps us get through difficult times. And if anybody's seen Hannah Gadsby, the comedian, her show Nanette, I think this quote really stood out for me, because I thought it was accurate and precise as to why I'm drawn to true stories and writing them and reading them. She talks about it saying, what I would have given to have heard a story like mine when I was growing up. And that's definitely an experience I had. I felt invisible when I read books, because they were always about other people, and there was nobody like me or my mother or my father, who were these living, breathing, sensitive, full human beings that I wanted to understand. So her quote, "The stories hold our cure, like it or not, your story is my story and my story is your story," really resonates for me. We are all going to be facing challenges. We're all going to have epiphanies, or minor epiphanies. We have obstacles and opportunities, and it's important to me that I understand how to get through these things myself, or I understand how someone else did it. You might want to examine the reasons that you write about family. I certainly do. I'm always excavating material and thinking, why is this coming up for me? Why am I obsessed with this story? Why do I want to pass this story on? And I worry. I come from a family that has a negative bias. There's a lot of worry. It's like we marinated in worry. We could bottle that worry up and sell it if it was something that you could exchange on the stock market and make a lot of money, because we're really good at it. But the intention matters. So it's not that I'm writing about the harsh things that happened thinking, oh, well, now I'm gonna, I'm gonna get my own back. I'll get my revenge with this. It's more that I'm trying to purge something that's living inside of me, and it's my feeling about this is that it's circling my neural pathways. Maybe it's keeping me up at night. Better that I spend some time thinking about sentence structure and how to make this into a story than worrying myself down to, just a person who's like some of my relatives that I can see, like there's just always that worry. That's just every day. That's what the motivation is, the fear factor. So what I do want to say is, when we're writing about ourselves, we don't need to worry about who we're writing about or what we're writing about. And we definitely don't want to let that inner critic whether it's like a version of ourselves or someone that we're very familiar with from our family, we don't want to think about them stopping us. First, we're writing just for ourselves. The process later of whether I submit this to a place for publication is something that it really shouldn't enter our thought process. We cannot let that person who could be the potential reader with the insider knowledge stop us from doing this. So what I mean is, if you're really wanting to write about something that you went through with your mother, and she lives so intensely in your mind, or is still with you and can actually weigh in on something, we don't want to think about her. We're not doing this to cause any harm or cause any distress. We're just doing this because the story has absorbed us in such a way that we're obsessed with it, and we want to get that out. We want to get that on paper. So some guidelines about when you're writing about yourself and your family. You don't talk about writing to the family, you just do the writing. So you don't, at this point, you don't want anybody's opinion influencing yours. Unless you're doing research like saying, that Christmas, were you seated next to Uncle Joe, or were you seated next to Aunt Lucia? You're not asking any questions that could then alter how you're going to tell the story. You do that in the editing. And then you just focus on the writing, building and building and building the material. My favorite quote by Buddhist teacher Sherry Huber: worry is not preparation. So if I could get my family to believe that, that would be fantastic. And then we want to focus on telling the truth as best as we can remember it, and also not getting hung up on the fact that memory is flawed. We have ways that we can introduce that you're not sure about this memory, or that your sister remembers it differently. There are ways with the writing craft that you can actually signal to the reader, listen, I know this isn't a documentary that I've written here. This is like my version of everything that I saw and witnessed and emotionally felt that day. Okay, so I want to start with some excerpts because I think they're excellent inspiration. This is from Yemeni Soup and Other Recipes by, as Leisha mentioned, my co-editor for Tongues, Ayelet Tsabari, and it's a brilliant award-winning essay that's in her memoir, The Art of Leaving. So the one time my mother visited me in Vancouver, she walked through our kitchen, arms crossed, nodding like an art collector at a gallery. She ran her hands along our stove, our IKEA island, eyed the steel pans hanging from the wall. Do you have chicken breasts? She gazed into my freezer. Potatoes? My boyfriend Sean and I had planned elaborate meals to impress her, but she wouldn't have any of that. She was happiest when she could cook for us. I watched her move between the stove, the sink, the fridge, training her body for a new dance routine, marking her space. She was at home when she cooked. It didn't matter that she was half a world away from her comfort zone. Kitchens were pockets of solace in every house, a neutral territory, a gastronomic Switzerland. After my father passed away, my mother spent most of her days in the kitchen. She didn't speak much, rarely looked at us, but she cooked endlessly with furious, careless motions. When she dug into the drawers for a pan, she'd bang the pots against each other in a high-pitched cacophony. She chopped vegetables with homicidal intent, and when she tossed schnitzel into the sizzling oil, it made a sound like a scream. She disappeared into the kitchen, became one with the appliances. Food replaced her words. Cooking became her currency. When she wasn't cooking, she cleaned. I woke to the sounds of furniture dragged across the floor, rugs beaten, appliances wheeled. Cleaning was my mother's form of meditation. It's also the one thing she could control. Her world may have fallen apart, but at least she had clean surfaces, laundered clothes, and food on the table. My mother fed me, did my laundry, cleaned my room, but it wasn't enough. I followed her around as she worked, tried to engage her in conversation. When that failed, I found more effective ways to get her attention. We fought about everything: my performance at school, my fashion sense, my messy room, my friends. I screamed that I hated her, stomped my feet, and slammed doors. She told me I was ungrateful, that one day I'd have a daughter just like me. Our relationship became so strange that once she passed me by on the street and didn't even acknowledge me. The problem, my brother once said, is that you're too much alike. I snorted. We're nothing alike. So some major figures that we end up writing about often could be a father or a mother. And I think the reason I wanted to just show these excerpts is because this is an excellent way to show that this is an essay that really delves into the two primal forces in our life, two primal needs for nourishment, one through the mother and one through food. And the attention to detail in talking about, it's described and it's broken down into meals that the mother makes. And so we see the grief, we see the loss, we see the love through food. And this essay is really like, well, it's an award-winning essay, but it's a love letter to the mother. And I think we want to think about when the person that we want to write about, we want to think about what's the activity that we most remember them doing? What's the thing that we connect them with? So some writing prompts that we're going to start with. What I want to say with these prompts is just write whatever comes to mind. I'm going to time us so that each prompt has about 2 minutes. We want to write by hand so that we, whatever is easiest for you, but writing by hand, I find, leaves us so that we don't judge what we're putting down, because you need it to be messy at this stage. And these are just warm-ups for generating material. So I want you to divide a page into 3 columns. And in that first column, you're going to title it Events, Situations. And I want you to list events or situations from your life and family that you might want to write about. So anything like the immigration, weddings that you attended, funerals, the big events that you think you'd like to address. And in my example column here, I've shown you some that I have written for myself. Learning to embroider, my dad's arrival in Halifax with only $26 in his pocket, his current ailing health, or the trip I took to Italy in 2016. So just 2 minutes, we're going to make a list of everything we'd like to write about. Okay, in the second column, again, I'm going to give us 2 minutes. I want you to list the people that you associate with those events or situations. Everybody you can name, everyone that comes up with that event that you can think of that you'd like, that is going to be included in what you write. 2 minutes. In the last column, I'd like you to title it Concerns. And I'd like you to list any concerns you have connected to what you've written in the first two columns, whether it's that you're worried about a bias, you're worried about that person finding out, or things that you'd like to link in that piece. So 2 minutes on this too, please. Okay, now I have a series of prompts that you can answer quickly in a list. I'm going to give you a little more time to answer these ones, but thinking about what we just read with the excerpts from Ayelet's essay, I want you to answer these questions. Who are you most similar to your family in appearance? What action do you associate them with? Who are you most similar in personality or temperament instead of physical features? What activity do you associate with them? Who do you get along with easily? List 3 reasons or 3 memories of times you got along. That time we went for a walk, that time we went shopping together, whatever that is. And the 4th one, who do you have the most difficulty being around in the family? What is it that they do? List 3 times that they frustrated you. That time we had the argument about this, the time they wouldn't let me go see my friend. Just to list a few. And then the 5th one is listing 5 words you would use to describe yourself to a new acquaintance, someone who you've just met. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes for these. We're going to go fast. Okay. So just take a moment to relax your wrists and unroll your shoulders, because we tend to get a little bit tense when we're writing even by hand. So I'm going to introduce another piece that's wonderful called Portrait of My Father by the writer Ali Smith. And this is actually going to inform the longer prompt that we're going to be doing in the workshop of using a photo. Okay. My father left school at 13. His family needed the money. When I asked him what he'd like me to say in this piece, he said, tell them I was in the Navy from 1942 to 1947 in 4 different invasions in North Africa, France, Italy, and I forget the other one. Tell them I'm 84 and a half. Tell them I'm a good salmon fisher, and so's my daughter, who caught the 3rd biggest fish of the year last month at Delphi in Ireland. No, I didn't, I said. It was the gilly. I just held the rod a bit. He laughed. Aye, but don't tell them that. My father put all 5 of us, my brothers and sisters and me, through university with a passion and foresight it took me decades to appreciate. My father is English. Whenever people in the Highlands, where he's lived since he married my mother in 1949, she died in 1990, comment on his Lincolnshire accent, he says, I came up to work on the hydro dams and never had the train fare back again. He was the main electrical contractor in Inverness and in the Highlands in the 60s and 70s until the coming of Thatcher, Dixon's, Curry's. Tell them I'm still conservative after all these years, he said. There's no way I'm telling them that, I said. My father one afternoon sat at the dinette table, unscrewed my talking bear whose cord had broken, and screwed it back together. It worked. When people are dead, graves aren't where to find them. They're in the wind, the grass. That's the kind of thing, he said. When I asked him, what do you do if you see something? When I asked him, what do you do if you see something in the dark that frightens you? He said, what you do is you go up to it and touch it. When things went wrong in the neighborhood, people would come to my father for help. When we went to visit an old neighbor last autumn in her 80s too, she called him Mr. Smith. Call me Donald now, Chrissy, he said. She shook her head. You'll have another biscuit with your tea, Mr. Smith, she said. My father as a boy was a champion footballer, boxer, ping pong player. His handsomeness as a young man is legendary. Every time I left for university, he tucked 20 pounds and a folded sheet of stamps into my pocket. Write to your mother, he said. So I love this piece. It's so short. There's this photo of them, and then you have all this tension. And she actually deals with the issue of when you're writing about somebody else by actually asking them, saying, what do you want me to say about you? And you can see there's this tension, you know, where he says, you can tell them I'm still conservative after all this time. And she says, oh no, I'm not gonna tell them that. And it's a wonderful reveal, the way that she shows you there's the tension between the two of them. And that's the last quote she uses from him about like himself. And then this quote that she ends on about him saying, write to your mother, and the love and the affection, the lack of opportunity that he had, the opportunities that he ensured his children had. There's so much in this piece, and it's really short. So she chooses to include him in the process of writing about him. So that is an option that's available to any of us. We could, if we still have that person with us, and say, what would be, you can ask them questions like, can I write about you? How would you like to be remembered? What's a tidbit of wisdom you'd like to leave behind? What's something you'd like to say? And then you can craft your story around that. And I also think it's wonderful that she sort of asks for the permission to write about him without saying, can I write about you? So it's like, this is an option that's open to us, even if the people are deceased, I think. You can actually say, I imagine this is how they would answer this question. You can actually deal with it within the craft of writing without having to feel like, oh, I can't, these people are gone, I can't go back, I don't have this opportunity. You can actually be like, I would ask this question of my grandmother, who passed away when I was 8. From everything I know about her, this is how she'd likely reply. Okay, so our longest prompt that I want you to work with is using a photo. Somebody commented on this photo that I had. It is a classic, isn't it? From a time and an era, look at us in front of a big appliance in North America. We made it. So I think, and I was asked to hold my skirt that way so that everybody could be like, oh, look, she's got a nice dress. And I loved that dress with the little tie. If I could find that outfit now, I would definitely have it. So if you don't have a photo picked out, you can use a mental snapshot or a memory of a photo. Sometimes photos get lost. It's haunted me forever that the photo of my dad on the Vulcania coming over is gone. It's just him on the deck of the ship and with about 20 other people, and it's cold, you know, everything's so gray. But I still, the image is in my mind. So you can use a photo that way. And what we're going to do with our photo prompt is we're going to start with answering these questions. So I'm going to give us about 3 to 5 minutes for the questions. We've got like a couple slides of questions, and then we're going to spend the majority of the time writing around that photo. So the first are very basic, like who's in the photo or this memory, who else is there taking the picture in the room, what's the occasion if it's an occasion. So this one, even though it wasn't an occasion, it's definitely a photo that they wanted to send to Italy because they wanted me. I mean, you know, I wasn't always wearing the nice clothes, and who's wearing shoes in the house? I had to dress up for this picture to be taken so they could be like in front of the TV. Let's show them how well she's dressed and how much we've made it. Look, we got a TV. What time of year is it, if you can remember? When was the photo taken? So what year or decade? That's what we want to start with. So let's start with, I'll give you about 4 minutes for these. Okay, the next set of questions I want you to think about. Are there any smells associated with the photo or the memory? So for example, this one for me, I always think of mothballs and lemon pledge because my mother was very good at cleaning that floor. Um, any sounds associated with the photo? So is it a lot of people talking? Is it a booming voice? Is it people arguing? And if uh, if you could start to actually describe the photos, like someone in the chat mentioned they had the same bowl, so you can try to describe the rest of the room that you can, if your memory was like a camera that was just going to look around the room, you've got the photo, what else is in that room with you? What are some things that, objects that represent things? So on the television set, we have two wedding photos from my parents. And I can look at them and remember seeing them. And so you want to just go into detail here. 3 minutes for this. Okay, and the last question I want to ask you before we're gonna work on writing about these photos in a more concentrated way is, what might you need to research to add depth to this photo or memory? So a brief list of the context of, so for me, it could be this photo was taken in Etobicoke in the 70s. What was happening in the 70s? What was on the television? What did we watch on TV? That kind of thing that might just give us a little more depth to the piece that we'd be writing. So 2 minutes to make that list. Okay, so we've got a lot of material, hopefully that helped generate some more things that you will end up now. We're going to spend the majority of our time using this writing prompt. I want you to think of either, you can choose from this list, and if nothing on the list appeals to you, you can keep going with something that may have already been sparked by the readings or the something else that we've done in the listing. But I want you to think a bit, either choosing to do the portrait of and choose someone from that photo, or choose someone you want to do a portrait of like Ali Smith has done. Or you're going to write, it's almost like you're writing an instruction manual, how to get along with fill in the blank, whoever it is in your family that you want to put in that position, or how to annoy blank, how to be a dutiful blank, so whatever that is, or how to thrive in the family like Fantetti. So, you know, if I chose one, I would say maybe I would choose how to thrive in the family Fantetti, and I would think about everything that I learned from my family, and it'd be like, keep your head down, work hard, but you're writing it as if it's instructions, like 1, keep your head down. Don't make any trouble. We don't want to draw the attention of the neighbors. We're already the loudest people on the block. So things like that. Choose one that speaks to you. And then we're going to write for 7 minutes without editing, without thinking. Just go as if you're telling somebody, this is what it's like to be in my family, or this is what it's like with dealing with this one person in my family, or this is a portrait of someone in my family. Okay. hopefully one of those worked for you. You can wrap up like your last thought. If you have a bunch of points, just make brief notes to keep that things, you'll keep going with this. I personally would love to see an anthology of how to be a dutiful fill in the blank by Italian Canadian writers. Wouldn't it be great? You could separate those sections. Or Italian American, Italian diaspora writers. All right, so what I want you to do is definitely check in with yourself and see where you might be holding any tension, some deep breathing, some hand rolls. Just, I don't want to assume, but I often am not writing about the best moments with my family. I try to include those so that there's a balance for the reader, but I'm usually obsessed with these stressful situations where we fell through the cracks of, say, healthcare or understanding each other, or when a crisis hit, how we all responded. So it definitely stirs up a lot of feelings in me. So if anything has come up, even just that feeling of missing somebody, we want to definitely check in with that and take care of ourselves for that feeling. So the last thing I'd like you to do is make a chart with 3 columns. This is a self-care list, which I think is incredibly important when you're doing anything, but I found it to be a vital tool because I write nonfiction and I have family members who are very unwell. And so I need to remind myself, because it's not immediately in my sphere of reference when I've finished writing. I'm just in that place of like, I just tried to get this all down. Oh, it's going to be messy. So you want 3 columns, and you want the first column to be activities that soothe. The second column has to be your favorite books, music, movies, and food, so that you can return to something that will actually center you and ground you. And the third column, people who comfort. I'm much more specific in my actual list than my friends, but I wasn't gonna, just for the example there. So let's just take a few minutes to do this. I call this the Haagen-Dazs approach. When I give presentations, or when I used to do presentations speaking about my family, both my parents have mental illness, I would definitely make sure that I had Haagen-Dazs stocked in the freezer for when I came home. And sometimes that was my dinner, because I'd be like, oh, that was hard work talking about these difficulties we went through. Now I'm going to have ice cream for dinner because I'm an adult and I can choose what I'm going to eat. So just a few minutes. you can keep adding to that list. I certainly add to mine, and mine is seasonal. Like what helps me focus in the summer is not going to be the same thing that helps me focus in the winter. Like I don't want to drink hot tea in the summer, or what helps center me, whatever those sensations are. Other things that you can do are search memoir prompts online, or true story prompts, or creative nonfiction prompts. The Proust questionnaire is available online, and it's at the Vanity Fair website, and it's just a parlor game from the time when Proust was alive, where you answered all these questions. And they're really interesting. There's some like, if you could come back as, I think one of them was, if you could come back as anything in the world, you know, after you died, if you could come back as anything, what would you come back as? And I actually asked my father that, and he just said, I don't know. And I thought, this is very interesting. He really can't think of anything. And then I said, I would come back as a healer, somebody who heals people. He, of course, with his hearing and the English-Italian translation, and with the way we talk Molisan, half English, half Italian in the sentence, he heard me say a killer. So all he said was, oh, that's bad. I said, what's bad about being a healer? And he said, a what? What's a healer? And it never occurred to me that he didn't know what the word healer meant. But I didn't know what healer was in Italian. So for a while there, my father thought I'd come back as a murderer. That's great. But it's something that you can actually take some interesting pieces from to continue writing. You can think about framing the story in an unusual way. So what we did with that photo prompt of how to, like an instruction manual, you could decide to write the story as if it was a recipe, a fairy tale, something that's familiar to you, something that makes sense to you. So something that would work with the person that you're writing about, or the memory that you're writing about. I do also have more prompts that I'd said to Licha that I can send along, as they're a part of a recommended reading list that I have. So the main thing I want to say is, whatever it is that you're trying to write about, try to read memoirs about that experience. So I know for a while I was really worried about reading about other people who had parents with mental illness. I thought, oh, it's just going to influence me. It's going to, or it's going to intimidate me. But in the end, it actually gave me the opportunity to see, like, oh, this is how you write a scene of violence. This is how you write a scene where, you know, frontline workers or frontline responders are coming to the house. It actually fills your knowledge base, fills the well of information that you need, and is inspiring. So whatever it is that you're writing about, like losing somebody or the grief, then just start Googling and searching for those memoirs that have that story, so that you can actually see how you want to tell your story. Definitely these books should all be available at the library. The Louise de Salva one is one of my favorites. Writing as a Way of Healing. It really addresses the fact that we write the stories of what happened to us, because otherwise we're just holding it in and containing it. And you want to transform that, whatever that is, you can do something with it instead of holding on to it, or instead of paying a lot in counseling to figure out what happened. You can do something artistic with it. I think she makes a really great case for that. That's all I really wanted to say. I'm grateful that you spent this time with me. Thank you so much for your writing, your interest in this topic. Licha, again, thank you for asking me to do this. Maria, please, grazie mille for the tech support. You made it so easy for me, so I'm super grateful. And then if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them.
Thank you so much, Eufemia. Yes, so if anyone has any questions, just unmute or raise your hand. We have about 20 minutes. Or you can type in the questions and we'll read them.
Hi, I just wanted to say that this was truly helpful to me. and the way you presented was truly helpful. Hearing the reading of the text that you advise with your voice as you're sharing all your personal experiences was truly instructive because it gives us time to pause and reflect. And hearing the voice also acts as a trigger in readings. And I think these are some of the most useful tips I've ever had. And I have to tell you, I've attended a lot of workshops. So I am truly, truly grateful for this. So not as much of a question because I think we've been given a lot here. So thank you very much.
I'm very grateful for that feedback, Irene. Thank you. I've thought about this a lot, and when I first set out to write my stories, there wasn't a lot of information out there, and I needed to, for me, the way I describe the experience is almost like walking up to a haunted house and knocking on the door and saying, "Let me in. I'm not afraid of ghosts. Oh, if there's skeletons that are going to come out of that closet, I'm okay. Maybe I'll scream," but it was definitely the process of being like, I don't want to go up to the haunted house anymore. I want to ease my way down the neighborhood. I want to maybe go in through the back door or the window so nobody sees me going in. And so it was the process of figuring out like gentle prompts to get me comfortable with writing about some big things that had happened in my family. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that feedback.
You did great work for us. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Irene. We have 4 hands up, so I will call Christina first, Steph second, Anna Romano Milne third, and Adele Newton fourth. And fifth, wait, just Mary DeRocco fifth. Go ahead, Christina.
Okay, thank you, Eufemia, for this workshop. I really enjoy it. It's like putting things in an organized way. My question is about I'm very disorganized when I'm writing. And you said at in one of the last slides that frame the story in an unusual way. I like that. So what I'm thinking is, my question is, should I go ahead and write whatever goes like in chapters? And after that, I could choose the frame of it, or how do you prefer to do this?
This is a really excellent question, Christina, because so I had to think of different frames for me, because when you first sit down to write, because you're coming as a reader, you're thinking, oh, I'll start at the beginning and I'll go to the end. And then there's all this chaos in trying to make order from our experiences. What I would say is, because the most calming thing in the world to do for me is make a list, because I need it all the time. I got to get groceries, I'll make a list. I got to do this, I'll make a list. Otherwise I forget. So I would start with even having a little notebook where you make a list of the things you want to make sure you cover. The time in the hospital, the time we received the diagnosis, the time we went to Italy, the time I fell down the stairs, whatever. So you're making a list. Then I would approach just writing each one of those scenes, because it's not that you're necessarily going to keep all of them, but they're coming up for a reason. And so until we know why, whether they belong in that story or the essay or the memoir, you don't want to challenge it. You just want to keep going back to the list and writing. For me, I'm usually halfway into the writing, or I'm thinking about it, and nothing happens until the frame comes to me. And it's frustrating because it's clearly a way that my thoughts are fragmented. But I think we all have fragmented thoughts and fragmented memories. It's not like we remember from this year, what happened. So I would say keep going with the list first, and then you can I've seen memoirs, like I was just reading Bluet's, and it's just each section is numbered 1, 2, 3, and she goes back and forth in time. So because when you try to look at the whole big picture, then we stop writing. And what's happening is your editor brain is coming in when your writer brain needs to show up. So start with the list, and then start thinking about frames that might be specific to your family. Like there's a lot of memoirs out there, like Encyclopedia of an Ordinary Life. She's written her memoir as an encyclopedia. The alphabet of, I can't even remember what this one's called, but there's some that are done in alphabet order. So they've taken words as so everything is open these days. It doesn't have to be the traditional structure, but I would start exploring reading pieces that are written in lyric structure or different structure. You can Google lyric memoirs, and then you can actually see one of them will speak to you.
Thank you so much. Very
You're
useful.
welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Steph, go ahead. Okay, so Steph maybe went.
Sorry, I just
Oh,
got a
there you
phone-
are. Okay.
I had a phone call. This was a very helpful workshop. I actually was very intrigued because my mom sent me a photograph in the winter, like last winter, and I used it as a writing prompt for a piece that I ended up presenting at the University of Toronto Italian Studies conference and the queer conference. And so I used the same photo to further think about today in the workshop. And yeah, wow, it was incredible. And I actually felt myself go back there because it was like my nonna's kitchen.
Right.
And I felt all the like associations of being in the space. And then I realized, oh, all these emotions are kind of coming up too about it's like time traveling,
Yes.
so this is sort of like what I'm working with, I think conceptually is like that kind of time traveling stuff. And so I guess I wanted to ask you if you have any thoughts to share on that art of memoir writing and the kind of time traveling that's happening with it all.
These are excellent questions. You're also sharp. Thank you. Well, what I would say, Steph, is recently I had a conversation with a friend where I was talking about a stress I'd had, and she referred to it. She said her counselor had referred to something similar for her as time travel. You're being yanked from the time that you're in and thrown into that time. And there's a whole host of associations with that. So the things that have worked for me, so I'm not saying this is the only way to do it, but the things that have worked for me is to have that self-care list, because so many emotions come up, and the overreaching one of my life has been grief. Like it's been a constant companion, the losing and the that feeling of not belonging, and that feeling there, it's just been constant. So I go back to my things that focus me and center me for the after I'm writing, for the during the writing, the time travel part of it. The thing I think to really focus on is, like you were saying, you were transported back there. What are the smells? What are the sounds? What are the things that are going to be the details that are going to help you get that story out, in terms of like, or even just like noticing your nonna's like actions. Like in Ayelet's piece, we really get insight to how her mother moves in a kitchen. She's like, chopping the vegetables with homicidal intent. She's grabbing those pots and pans. So it's very, very visual, but also very, very much the sound. And if I find that if I focus on those details, it's very helpful for me. There's a writer out there, Charles D'Ambrosio, who's he's got an interview where he says, instead of sobbing, I focus on sentence structure. And I've never forgotten it, because I'm like, it always brings up emotions for me. What could have been? What if? But I think if we focus on the details, the sensory details, and then also help ourselves, because we've just been time traveling, and if time travel was real, we'd go back and we'd change certain things. We'd say, I'm going to do this way, or I'd speak back to this person, that kind of thing. So, and in time traveling, in writing, you get to time travel. You can actually even insert a paragraph that says, if I could go back to this moment, I would step in here and say, you can't talk to my mother that way, or something like that. And I think it's the beauty of writing. You get that opportunity to do that, but then you also have to address the human being that shows up to write that story. That's the human being that's showing up to write the story is the adult, But the child that was like, for me, in Italy when I was 5, that 5-year-old is very present. And she's like, give me the ice cream now. Why are you messing around? Give me the ice cream. I hope that helps.
Thank you, Eufemia. So Anna, Adele, Mary, and then a question from Janet in the chat. Anna?
Thank you. And thank you so much for this workshop. Very helpful. And I'm a fellow Molisana, so peace. So I wanted to go, I wanted to go back to the exercise we did with the prompts where we listed a whole bunch of events and situations. And then the concerns we have sometimes with those, you know, like maybe it's a very difficult topic, a painful topic, too personal, etc. I wondered if you could just briefly touch on strategies to overcome those concerns.
So I think the first part is being very aware of them and then speaking to them. So in one of mine, I'm like, this is not a great portrait of this character. So then I might address it by saying, can I include something that makes him not sound terrible? Or can I include a part that makes me sound like I'm being really difficult? Or can I contextualize this to say, he lost his brother in the war and he grew up incredibly poor. So it's like, whatever the concern is, and if it's like this topic is too, like nobody wants to talk about it, then I actually address it. It doesn't necessarily end up in the writing, but I can speak to the actual concern and then say, like, how would I balance this out? If I'm giving a negative portrayal of my mother, can I write about that time that she woke me up because I went to bed hungry and she fed me Cheerios, something like that. So I do it that way. I find what's the opposite scene of that scene, or what's the thing that will comfort the reader and myself in that.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. Again, these are all excellent questions.
Hi, Adele.
Hi, thanks so much, Eufemia. Honestly, in an hour, you covered more than what I had in a 6-month course in a continuing ed class. So thank you. I'm actually writing about the women and food of Southern Italy. And
Yes.
and it's on my Substack. I'll put it in the thing if any of you want to look at it. But here's my challenge. So I just wrote a piece. My son and I were in Italy in May, his first visit to our little town in Basilicata, which is like, you know, teeny, and he's vegan. So I wrote all about the family and blah, 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 but he's, and understandably so, wanted to look at it before I published it. And he was mostly okay with it, but I worry about, and you put it, I think, in your first slide, as I'm writing, what are the people I'm writing about going to think? Do I need to show it to them? Do I need, certainly if you're writing about someone, you need their approval. So at the moment, I'm interviewing a lot of my girlfriends from high school and grade school about their mother. I spent last Friday with my girlfriend whose family's from Sicily, and we cooked. Now, when I write about her family, what do? Do you have to show it to them for their permission? Do I have to be careful? I'm stumped.
Yeah, it's what stumps everybody, and that's an excellent question, Adele. It's what stumps everybody with the true stories, which is why I said, like, first you have to just write it. First, you just have to get it down. Once you've got it polished and edited, that's when you go to the person and say, I wrote about that time we got together. Can I share it with you in case you have any concerns about it? Because people will get upset about the quirkiest things. They might let you write about the dinner, but they might be like, I can't believe you revealed I wear a hearing aid. How could you do this to me? This is private. I don't talk about this. So you do have to, you know, for the people that have passed on, I always light a candle and say, my intention is just to share where we came from and all the suffering that came through us, the intergenerational trauma. I'm not writing to humiliate anybody, even though secrecy was a big part of that experience. So when you're writing about other people, I think you can ask for their permission or try to focus on yourself more and include them a little bit less, like a moment with them or something like just, it's only a few sentences about them, but it's your like experience of them. Then you can go and ask the permission. But I would say, like, you can't think about that when you're writing. That has to come like way later. It's almost like that's the final editing stage.
Thank you, because that is the obnoxious voice in my head as I'm writing. And I put my Substack, Dandelion Greens, because of Chicoria, .substack.com.
Fantastic. Thank you.
But thank you, because you're writing about real people. And yeah, the only thing my son gave me shit for was having a picture of him in there, but he had to be in there. So too bad.
Thanks, Adele. Mary, go ahead, and then we'll answer Janet's question, and then Marco has a question as well.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for this very full workshop in terms of organization and ways to generate the material. I've been writing, I don't know how many years now, putting together the pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. Part of it is identifying the pieces and then figuring out how they'll all fit together. And there's definitely an emotional heartbeat in all of this. So I appreciate the self-care emphasis. I think that's so important, particularly for us as women from this background. So here's my question with that introduction. I have been writing in different groups, but everybody is like white groups, and there's nobody like this group. This is actually the first time I guess, took the step to sign up for a group that is of my own background. My father is Sicilian, and that seems to be the blood that I keep writing about. For some reason, my mother's family came from Campania, south of Naples. But I guess, what is my question? How do I move off of this avoidance, I guess, of finding or creating a group of people that I could read my writing to, which is the writing of my family story, so that there's some kind of a feedback loop where people get it. And if I use an Italian word, I don't have to explain what it means. I feel like a stranger in a strange land, which is probably the metaphor for growing up with this background in America for me. So that's what my concern is.
I don't know, because I think you said you're in the States, yes?
Yes.
So I don't know what the Association of Italian American Writers is like, but they must have chapters, writing groups, maybe people that you can connect with, or even stay connected with AICW and Licha, because I think that's incredibly important. Like to find the people that you don't have to translate everything for, because it's exhausting. It's like, oh, it's the same reason why I couldn't find my parents reflected in the literature that I was reading growing up, and that we felt invisible, so it's important to find that. I'm not sure the best way to do that. You can start like just looking at maybe the journals that are published by the Association of Italian American Writers. I think it's I can't remember the name of the press. Licha can help me. Okay. Do you know that one that I'm talking about?
I know,
The
Bordighera.
Thank you, Bordighera. And see if there's writers there that you can reach out to, if they have websites, things like that. Okay.
If I may, if you're looking in person, then you'd have to look there. But if you're looking virtual, then we do have the Accenti Let's Write twice a month. We haven't picked that up again. I mean, it's not exclusively Italian Canadians or Italian Americans. Everyone is welcome, but there is a big group of Italian heritage. And Eufemia mentions, this is an Accenti workshop, but Eufemia mentions the Association of Italian Canadian Writers because I am the president of that organization.
Right.
And
sorry.
it's okay. And there we have 2 groups, I believe. They get together every week to write, and they're all of Italian heritage. But I mean, there is no Eufemia there. It's everybody getting together just to speak. So if you're interested to write, to take time to write and then to chat, if you're interested in that, just send me an email or write to accenti@accenti.ca or write to info@aicw.ca, and we'll let you know as soon as those groups pick up, or if the AICW I think are going on still, we'll give you the information of the person who's running them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary. Okay, so we have a question from Janet and then a question from Marco. Janet wants to know if you have any suggestions for publishing memoir, Eufemia.
I think definitely once you feel like you're ready, start looking at where other memoirs that you like have been published, or look at those journals, look at university presses, because sometimes it can be really hard to look at independent presses. Leach is associated with one. So I would just start looking at those presses first and see who they publish. And if they publish, like, make sure you're doing that search that's specific to they will publish memoir, or they will publish essays, or they have a vested interest in writing about the writing from the Italian diaspora. So that kind of thing is where you start, instead of like, you know, being like the goal is Random House and only Random House. Then it's just like looking, it's doing that specific research so that you can then get people who are going to respond.
Thank you, Eufemia. Marco?
Thank you, Licha, and thank you, Eufemia, and others for all the questions. And Eufemia, the writing prompts were wonderful, so thank you. I wrote quite a lot today, which was nice, and I'm sure others feel the same. Really quickly, I was just curious if you could, I'm always looking for reminders for myself when I'm writing about, let's say, my grandmother. So as a male writer, what should I remember, or to be sensitive to, you know, my bias there? So if you have any tips, that would be helpful.
These are all such excellent questions that I wish it was like, I know it's being recorded, but I'm going to write them down and use them for future prompts. This is an excellent question. I think if you think about in terms of like, when was your grandmother born? What was the political situation in Italy at that time? What were the cultural expectations, the gender expectations, the things that were unquestioned, unchallenged in that time period? And when, if she came to North America, what was that like? And seeing it from the perspective of like, you know, there was no, you never saw my grandmother in pants. That was never going to happen. But, you know, like, what would it have been like for her to have been in Toronto in winter in those skirts that were only meant for Southern Italy with those black stockings? I can't imagine. So I think if you start just, Marco, by paying attention to the details of what were the restrictions or constrictions for a woman of her time and place, and then asking, you know, I didn't even think about the fact that like they didn't have running water. It took me years to be like, how did you all wash your hair? You know, it's just something you take for granted. And then those kinds of things, telling from a perspective of like what it would have been like in that time, in that place, I think will show the sensitivity. The fact that you're asking the question shows a sensitivity as well. Like, that's wonderful.
That's a great question and a great response. Thank you both.
Can I just say something? Marco,
yes.
if you're worried about what you're writing about her from your perspective, I believe that your perspective as her grandchild is perfectly reasonable. That's what you knew of your nonna. And it may not be the same as what your cousins knew or your brothers or sisters knew, but that's your memory of your nonna. And I think that's perfectly valid. That's my opinion. So
Very true. Very true.
Actually, Adele wrote in the chat, can we form our own writing group? So that's a good say. Adele, take it away. Anybody interested?
I go to the London Writers Salon almost every day. If you don't know it, it's fabulous. It's people from all over the world get together like this over Zoom for 1 hour at 8 o'clock London time, Toronto time, LA time, and New Zealand time, which is 4 p.m. our time. And they get on Zoom and they have two people who, you know, say, here are some words of wisdom, and you write for an hour like this. And then and you set your intention in the chat. And then at the end, they talk to a couple of people. London Writers Salon. Now, you won't get all Italians, but for this, Licha, if you've got all our email addresses, all you need to do is send us a note and say, do you want to get together?
We need somebody to work on that. I can send the emails of anybody who's interested, but we need a master to take over, not me.
Oh, gee, this is how I get into trouble.
In your spare time, Licha.
Well, yeah, I'm already doing things in my sleep.
Yeah.
Okay. However, I am applying for a grant to do just this. Like right now we've done workshops, and our next project is to take it a step further, where we would be doing a writing group. But I don't want to say anything and we're gonna have to cut that out, Maria Pia, because we don't know when we apply for grants. Thank you all for your questions. Let me see if there are other. I think we've covered all the questions.
If I could just say, Licia,
Eufemia?
thank you everybody for those wonderful questions. And I do hope you can continue to work on those prompts and take away the self-care ones and the ones where you've got like generated material. So because I honestly, there's not enough writing for me about the Italian diaspora, not at all. You know, I know, like I said, Licia is connected to press, and there's Guernica and all the others, but I'm like, there's still not enough. There's not enough. We could keep going. My grandmother that was in that PowerPoint, she couldn't even read and write. So the stories that didn't get told, that I've lost, I want to hear them all. So thank you for being here and participating.
Not enough
in
about
this.
the women, because it's always from the men's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. Yeah. And the women, I mean, the Italian Canadian women, I've only started seeing them get published the last 30 years. Before that, it was mostly the men. All right. So I think we'll close here. Let me just close officially. So Eufemia, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for accepting to give this workshop. Thank you everyone here who participated. Wonderful questions. We will be sending you a survey to fill out to give your feedback on how we can possibly improve the series of workshops. Let me remind you that you can now register for the next 2 workshops, and I've put the link in the chat. We have workshop 7 on Tuesday, October 18th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. Eastern time on Zoom, and that is with Anna Camilleri, and the title of the workshop is Cultivating Voice Within Immigrant Canadian LGBTQ2+ Communities. And you don't need to be part of the LGBTQ+ community to come. And workshop 8, Saturday, November 12th from 1:30 to 3 p.m. again on Zoom Eastern time with Irina Guzzi, who's here today. What's so funny? The pearls and perils of caring for a loved one, Right. So thank you very much. Thank you all for being here at Accenti's Countering Isolation with Creativity, a project made possible through the financial support of Employment and Social Development Canada as part of the New Horizons Seniors Program. Thank you, Eufemia. Thank you, Maria Pia, for providing technical support. And you know, everyone at Accenti is very grateful for your presence. And I'm actually, personally, I'm very happy to see faces to names that I've seen on lists, Marco, Adele, that I've never, you know, actually seen your faces, but I've seen your names. And I'm very happy to see people that I've met before, like Anna Maiolo and Caterina in Italy. And please come back anytime. If you have any questions, just send us your questions at accenti@accenti.ca.